Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alia Mahin Ahmed, Features Editor at Entrepreneur Middle East. Before we jump into the panel, just a quick introduction to the brand. I'm sure Entrepreneur as a brand is not one that most in the room are unfamiliar with, but for those who do need a refresher, we are indeed the regional edition of the US-based publication Entrepreneur, and as such, we pride ourselves on being the voice of innovation and entrepreneurship in the region. So last year, on something of a whim, I read this book called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. I'm not saying this to share my reading list with you. But the gentleman who wrote this book, Richard Feynman, did a speech at MIT in 1982, which is precisely the reason 44 years later we're even having this panel discussion today. Richard Feynman is unanimously regarded as one of the foremost contributors to quantum computing. And in this particular book, he ends it with a quote that I feel like we need to start this panel with. He says, "I would like to add something that is not essential to the science, but something I kind of believe, which is you should not fool the layman when you're talking as a scientist." And like Georgia mentioned, this is a somewhat complex topic, somewhat novel topic, and we hope that this panel can somewhat make it accessible to the masses. So I'll start with you, Steve.
Yeah.
Just to ensure that we're on a bit of a similar starting point in the room today. If you could briefly explain what quantum computing is and how they differ from the classical computers that we know and the evolved versions of the supercomputers.
And I have 3 hours to do that? Is that no? Hi, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like you to think about is your operating system. So some of you guys have iPhones, right? That operating system is made by Apple Computer. You have Windows laptops that are made by Microsoft. These are all man-made operating systems. The really cool thing about quantum is that we're using Mother Nature's operating system of how things work, quantum mechanical. Even the strongest supercomputer today works on ones and zeros. But what makes quantum so special is that it can be in both states at the same time through this concept called superposition. When you combine superposition with entanglement, which means two particles that are tied together, and it doesn't matter how far apart they are in the universe. I can have a particle here on Earth and one in Pluto, and if something happens to this particle, it impacts the other particle. That's faster than the speed of light. And it's what happens in quantum mechanics. Actually, Einstein used to call it spooky action at a distance. We know it happens, but it's really hard to understand. So the great thing about this technology is that it can give us exponential speed up in certain very specific use cases and do a lot of really good. I know we have a lot of finance people in here in financial services, but it also threatens our cryptography around RSA and elliptical, which I'm sure the panelists will talk about. So I hope that at a basic level, just explains what it is.
Absolutely. Now that we've sort of said that base, Leandro, I'll come to you next. You at the Quantum Research Center, which falls under the Abu Dhabi government's Advanced Technology Research Council, you essentially oversee the development of state-of-the-art, next-gen quantum technologies. We'll come to the opportunities in just a bit, but let's talk about the challenges. There is one very obvious impediment to quantum computing, which is the fact that the quantum computers need to be stored at extremely cold temperatures. Again, for the audiences, if you read it online, it says somewhere between minus 273.14 to minus 273.15 degrees Celsius, which is extremely cold. But let's also talk about realizing quantum computing on a large scale and some of the other equally pressing challenges from both a hardware and software perspective.
Yes, thank you. The main challenge is that there are two types of challenges. There's at the hardware level and at the software level. At the hardware level, the main challenge is first to build new types of qubits that have longer coherence times and that can have higher fidelity, but at the same time to scale up to many qubits, right? So the big challenge is how to go from laboratory demonstrations on a few hundreds of qubits to really 1 million qubit chip architectures that can support advanced quantum error correction techniques, right? And that's a very hard engineering challenge. But even if you told me, okay, I give you today a large-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer, there are also challenges at the software level. So what happens at the level of quantum algorithms is that there are very few examples for which we have strong evidence of having, let's say, exponential quantum runtime speedup in an end-to-end sense of the application, right? So there are some evidence for some problems, right? But then that's also something very pressing. So it also requires further investments into quantum algorithms and quantum software research, right? So lots of investment had gone recently on quantum hardware, and this is improving a lot. But there are still too few problems for which we have strong evidences of very big quantum runtime speedup, right? So these are big challenges to be solved in the next few years, and this makes our field very exciting also, both for investors and scientists too. Yeah.
Perfect. Meherwan, I'll come to you next.
Yeah.
The crux of this panel is what would it be like if we were quantum ready tomorrow? Say we did achieve quantum capabilities, we unlocked complete quantum capabilities tomorrow. What would be the top 2 to 3 industries that can unlock research and innovation that has hitherto been impossible?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think with my colleagues, it's very important basically to set the stage where quantum does not solve everything, is what my colleague was saying. It's very specific for some task. And this is, I think, a quite general, I would say, trend within basically computing, where we're mostly not anymore very general purpose, but we're trying basically to build systems which are very tailored. Analog computing, quantum computing, you have optical computing. All these are within basically trends where we saw that we have massive gains by being more specialized. I mean, if some people here on AI, you have GPUs and CPUs typically. You're not going to use a GPU to do your Word document typically. And so if you want to parallelize, you're going to do it. And so coming back to your question, of course, the big opportunities are where, of course, you have specific cases where this massive scale of solving problem and optimizing them kicks in. One of the big things that people are looking at beside the cryptographic case, which comes back often, is drug discovery. So a lot of problems in biology where you need to simulate a lot of molecules, which the number of nodes, the number of billion nodes would take you years to do. You want to do it in a couple of seconds. So in the field of drug discovery, I think there's great opportunities in simulating all these events that you're having and being able, of course, to rerun events at a speed, at a certain speed. The second also basically is everything related to network optimization of problems. I mean, I'm putting optimization as this general basically purpose technology using quantum because optimization is nearly everywhere. And large-scale problems are there. I mean, ADNOC here in the UAE has been investing heavily, trying to collaborate with quantum researchers to build some kind of use cases. But of course, network optimization is a big thing. And the third one, which I think is very important, is basically where we're lying here, is the financial services. Financial services are a lot of events that you cannot model, a lot of interactions that you need basically to look at and how these things, a lot of basically parameters that you need to take into account, and these kind of systems are very tailored. I must admit that we are now within my university looking a lot on quantum AI. We still haven't figured out how some processes which are very specific to AI could run on quantum computers, like the transformer architecture or whatever, but I think once this would be unlocked, big potential in AI.
Absolutely. Now, again, for the audiences, it was in October 2019 that Google announced that its Sycamore processor had reached something known as quantum supremacy. To make it simple, what it really meant is something that takes classical computers 10,000 years to solve could now be solved in 200 seconds. So that sort of puts things into perspective. But for such robustness and speed to make its way into our day-to-day lives, scientists predict around another decade or so. But that isn't to say that such a future isn't coming. But to ensure that we are ready for such a quantum-driven future, we need our business leaders, our startup founders, of course, governments, to be prepared for it, to be prepared to welcome it. Steve, at MIT, you teach a course known as Quantum Computing Strategy and Impact, which is basically designed to help organizations understand what is coming and prepare with confidence. But in congruence with that, you are also helming the Quantum Index, which is basically, it's a metric, it's a platform that recognizes the organizations that are quantum ready. If you had to pick out 2 to 3 traits in the organizations that have been more quantum agile compared to their peers and competitors right now, what would those 3 traits be?
Well, if you look at the quantum index, it's called the quantumindex.com. What we're doing is featuring the top companies that are using quantum computing in the use cases. So we've got financial services. You could guess who's at the top of that list. We've got automotive, life sciences. We were talking about how you can look to simulate drug discovery. And we just released recently, and I know for this region, energy. And so who are the top energy companies that are using quantum computing and how they're leveraging that technology? It is nascent. They're in the beginning stages, but I think it's a really good index to really show who are the leaders so that you can understand how to leverage this technology. One thing I will mention, you mentioned the October article in. Actually, when I used to be the global head of innovation at HSBC for global functions, and I remember that day that that article came out, I was asked to update the board to say, hey, Steve, is our cryptography at risk? And I had to kind of first educate myself and then explain to everybody, look, it's going to take a while, but eventually you do need to look at it and it's got to be a concern. So I think that was a big turning point for me. So from an education perspective, take a look at who's leading and what they're doing, what research papers they're doing, what patents, team size, and these are all things that we evaluate in one of my companies, which is called the Quantum Index.
All right. I'll continue that line of conversation with you, Meherwan. By the time we are indeed quantum ready, we will have a new generation of business leaders in the market, more AI-driven, more eager to learn, perhaps. What do you think needs to be changing in the classrooms within universities and schools? And perhaps an add-on to that would be, what sort of collaborations do you think need to be happening between government, academia, and the quantum industry to ensure that the next generation of leaders are quantum ready?
Yeah, so just to set up the stage here in the UAE, so we started having basically, I would say, a bit of a quantum readiness within a different organization, TII being one, opening in a center. And we got a lot of requests coming from different stakeholders. We need talent. And so I'm quite happy to announce that we took our responsibility and we're opening basically a master program and a PhD program on quantum at Khalifa University. So this is a big step, basically, I think, in the Middle East to kickstart that kind of activity because of the needs that we're starting. Now, of course, we need to educate. Why I'm saying this is because wherever we go, even when we start talking to stakeholders or even students at university, quantum is always about a cat which is locked in a box and nobody knows if he's dead or alive. That's always the example that they give me,
Yeah.
and nobody really understands why it's useful. They tell me, okay, maybe we can discover if the cat is alive or dead. Of course, there's an important effect not only to educate what we're doing at Khalifa at a higher level, but go on the quantum literacy very low down. I'm very familiar with AI. In AI, we have been doing that. AI now is not anymore considered basically as something that needs to be taught at the very high level. We're starting to embed it in the UAE at the high school level, but even at the level of primary school. And I dream, of course, of having a bit of quantum literacy because you don't need these kind of states, things like that are important, but you could still transmit some messages on how these quantum stuff are used for kids and going on. And I think this is a way we have to do because once you embed the new generation, it grows up, it starts also to get interest, and then we have all these leaders which are, and I don't think we'll have a chief quantum officer like we have a chief AI officer at this stage, but at least we get some leaders which are basically knowledgeable about the topic, and then they can embed that. And that requires, of course, an ecosystem. The ecosystem of research, I think, started. We are taking our responsibility at Khalifa by, of course, embedding quantum, of course, training within our different things. And now we hope also that the people we're forming will start basically empowering those different organizations to start also thinking on how, we start purchasing quantum computers. We start basically running some projects. And we're seeing it. As I gave you as an example, Adenok today has been one of the big organizations in energy, which is now trying, to push quantum to understand better how to do reservoir type of techniques. Yeah.
Absolutely. Leandro, I will come to you and talk about something that both Steve and Meherwan touched upon, and that's cryptography. Now, in the midst of all the possibilities that quantum can potentially unlock, there is also this very palpable fear surrounding encryption. Again, to make it accessible to the audiences, our current digital systems are secured by something known as RSA encryption, and classical computers will take about thousands of years to decrypt any of these permutations and combinations, but I think we've sort of established now that quantum computers can do it in a fraction of a second. So there is this fear that is sort of evident among leaders. In your work at the quantum key distribution multi-node testbed at ADGM, in light of cryptography and also the wider UAE quantum ambitions, could you please talk about the significance of the work you do there?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a very interesting development that we're doing at the Quantum Research Center. In the Quantum Research Center, we have a full stack approach to quantum technologies. We study quantum computing, quantum sensing, quantum algorithms, and also quantum communications. So there's a very nice exercise that happened recently here. It's a multi-node QKD system that is deployed at Abu Dhabi's financial heart, connecting ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Market, Abu Dhabi Global Market Academy, and Hub 71. That kind of groups several startups in the fintech sector, right? And there are not too many examples in the world of multi-node QKD systems deployed. Really, I can count them with a single hand, right? With the fingers of a single hand. And it's very nice. It's a testbed. This means that startups and stakeholders interested in trying it, they will be able to use secret key bits that are ready to use for encryption of communications, namely messages or Zoom calls or you name it, right? This is running and it's collecting secret keys, so it has a very high rate. And it's very interesting because it shows the level of advancement of that type of technology, right? This is moving, this is no longer just an experimental technology inside the lab, this is already being deployed in the field, right? And for the moment, like I said, this is inside the Abu Dhabi financial heart. We, of course, have plans to make this, to establish connections between Dubai and Abu Dhabi and eventually also internationally. So something else that we have at the Quantum Research Center, we have an optical ground station operating 45 minutes drive in the Al Wathba Desert. So you go there and we have like a telescope that is ready to receive single photons sent by future satellite missions that are planned for long distance QKD transmission, right? So the idea with quantum key distribution is if you do it, in a short scale, in a short distance, you use telecom fiber webs. But if you really want to do something international, you need to rely on space communications, right? So that's actually very interesting. This is already kind of closer to, let's say, commercial practicality and implications than, let's say, quantum computing technologies, right? That's really an exciting thing that is going on right now.
Absolutely. My favorite panels are when I forget I'm the moderator and I get engrossed in the conversation. We're down to like the last 6 minutes. I have 2 questions for all 3 of you. The first being, what is the one big misconception about quantum computing that you observed, and how can we address that? Steve, I'll start with you.
The first, I would say you don't have to be a quantum physicist. I'm actually lucky to be kind of surrounded with quantum physicists here, but this is an opportunity for you to get involved, get engaged. Don't be intimidated by quantum mechanics. Quantum is going to need people in every industry and every function. Think about finance, think about HR, marketing. So if you're interested, and I really believe this is going to be the technology of the future. I'm excited about AI, but I'm incredibly excited about the potential within quantum. So educate yourself, and this is not a plug, but it kind of is a plug. I've got a class for executives, tailor-made for executives at MIT for people that want to learn about quantum, specifically around the finance field, which is where I came from.
Yes. Mehran?
Yeah, so there's, first of all, a classical joke when everybody starts basically presenting quantum, at least quantum computing, he starts like, everybody knows what is a classical computer. Let's start with quantum computer. But I think nobody knows how a classical computer works. And so at the end, we're a bit stuck. I think the big mistake is, of course, to think that quantum computers are classical computers with more speed. It's not at all that. It's not about speed. Because if you get into that, of course, you get into the kind of thought that, I'm going to have a classical computer and it's going to be charging much faster. We're talking about a different architecture which will not solve all the problems that you have. They are very specific to some specific tailored applications. The applications are very narrow. However, the breakthroughs that you can do on those applications can have a fundamental impact. As of today, we know some cases, and crypto is one, the security that we're talking about. We're seeing in bio and others where it goes, and the gates are quite open. But having the idea that a quantum computer is a classical computer with more speed, I think this is what people, unfortunately, need to take out from their mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally resonate with what Merwan says. Quantum computers are not here to substitute classical ones. It's not that you're going to use a quantum computer to answer emails or these type of things, right? They are going to be, at least in the beginning, the first business model that quantum hardware providers and manufacturers are aiming at is really to think of QPUs as one more accelerator inside an HPC data center, right? So you may have GPUs and you may have also TPUs, and then you also have quantum processing units to really solve very specific tasks, right? Of course, at the moment, to understand how to use these QPUs, you need to have a deep level of understanding of quantum computation, but I also agree with you that at some point when these functionalities will be better understood, then people will build kind of like black box subroutine for 19-year-old kids to play with and innovate and create the new quantum startups of the future, right? But it's a misconception to believe that quantum computers will replace classical ones, right? There will have to be lots of integration, like I said, with GPUs, but also with artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. In fact, both quantum computers can end up having implications on more efficient AI algorithms, but also classical AI algorithms is useful for quantum computing, in particular, for instance, for quantum error correction. So imagine you have like a quantum computer and there's noise and you need to correct for those for that noise. And then you will have to have, next to the quantum computer, you will have to have a classical computer running a very smart and fast machine learning algorithm to kind of understand the errors taking place in the device and then correct them. So these two fields are very synergetic, right? There's lots of potential there too. But really, again, quantum computer will be a new complementary computing technology.
Yeah. From what I gather, I feel like all these developments are happening in silos. Of course, for it to become a more coherent industry, it will take us a few years. But let's talk about the one next immediate step organizations in the UAE, whether in finance or other industries, can take towards becoming more quantum ready. If you had to advise business leaders for the one next immediate step that they can take, what would that be?
It's education. You got to understand what's reality. These guys talked about it, and what's hype. And with any new technology, there's going to be people that are going to overhype it. So understanding exactly what you can do and how you can use it will be key.
Absolutely. Miriam?
Yeah, I think also everything about quantum literacy is very important in this organization to understand better, basically, of course, what you're aiming and basically what you can already do with the existing technology and where you're going. I think it's always difficult to forecast the future. We all know it. However, betting on quantum is a good investment. The issue we have today with quantum is we are certain it's going to come, but we don't know exactly when. And so when you have that thing, of course, the only way you can tackle the future like that is to prepare.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I resonate with that too. Many people want to know what is going to be the killer application of quantum computer. That's the $1 trillion question, right? But the truth is that it's a technology that it's in its infancy, and then you need to let the baby grow to really see what it's going to be its best use cases, right? So something that is a safe investment is education awareness, both at the executive level and at the education level, right? So this is very important. It's something that is on very high demand, talent especially.
Absolutely. So I think moral of the panel is if we are to be ready to welcome a quantum ready future, we need to have quantum literacy in place and we need to be more educated about it. First, thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a very engaging conversation. I hope you all have learned something and take some real practical insights home as well. Thank you very much for having been a rapt audience. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.